G'day everyone, it's James Davis from the Paxate Academy again, and I've got Dan Williams from Without Fear here today. How you doing, Dan?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for joining me today. I think we're going to cover a super important topic around mental wellness today that we're just not speaking enough about in the industry. So it's going to be a bit deep and meaningful, I think, today, but I think it's what people need to hear. Um,
Yeah,
and
sure. I'm
maybe,
ready. I'm ready. I'm ready to go as deep as you like.
well, that's fantastic. I'm going to start with an easy one today.
Yeah.
Tell me about Without Fear. Where does it come from? What's it about?
Yeah. So, Without Fear is what we call a social enterprise or a certified social enterprise. We're mental health awareness, centered as a social enterprise, and for us, it's about actually we turn one next week, which is pretty exciting. Celebrate our first birthday. But also, it's something that is near and dear to my heart. And Without Fear is about giving people tools and creating awareness so that they feel safe to speak up without fear. And it's born from a personal journey, and with fear being at the center of a lot of the reasons why we don't seek help with our mental health. And it's my way of trying to make a positive dent in the universe, in that area in particular.
You've been very highly successful in your career, and lots of people know you out there in the industry. So, hearing you talk about this has been your sort of personal journey. Be interesting to hear what you went through, and I don't think a lot of people would have seen or appreciated that life journey that you went through.
Yeah, it's dawned on me. I've done about 10 talks this year, showing up as Without Fear, and recently did one in an IT industry setting, and it dawned on me just how few people understood what my motivation was and had heard my personal story, and also the power of actually telling your story. So before I do give a bit of background, I just wanted people to know that telling your story, and no matter what your experience is a really important step to empower others to tell their story. And there might be just something that resonates with people, and you might not think it's worth telling. And I tell you, it is every time. And so please do. And for me, it really goes back to my childhood. I was an anxious child, and kind of got labelled as having a short fuse quite often. And realistically, it might have come across that way, but it was really just anxiety driven. I was a rat bag as well, which didn't help. I didn't get a lot of empathy and sympathy because I was a rat bag. Um, but I grew to be somewhat withdrawn teenager, and really stumbled my way through high school because of those sort of things I was dealing with. And I found my way into the IT industry, and around the age of would have been 18, and playing a leadership role in a company really at age 21, which was PowerNet, and I accumulated a huge amount of experience as a professional, but I didn't get any better at dealing with my mental health through my career. I'd find new ways to go to market, new ways to lead people, new products. I could innovate and I could lead and I could inspire, but I was all the while not getting any better at looking after myself. Went through lots of things like, dark days of, hiding away, running away from my issues, through to, drinking excessively, giving up on the things that actually helped me, like sport, because I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And that sort of culminated around a lot of people looking in on me from outside, and looking at the successes, and seeing things that had worked, and the growth of the business, and then me thinking, actually, I need to do something about this. My own mental wellness. And there was a major life event that happened for me back in 2019, where one of my children was involved in a serious accident, and it just caused me to reevaluate my life. And it sounds dramatic, but there's no other way to put it. That's exactly what I went through. And I'd had, in the lead up to that, I'd started having conversations about my mental health and well-being. And every time I had one of those conversations, I felt a bit better. And in fact, when I started to help other people, I started to feel even better. And that life event, as I call it, made me realize that I was doing a lot of things that weren't serving me. And I was letting my fears control me. And I decided also at that point that wasn't going to happen anymore. And I say a little bit flippantly that I walked away from the business after that event and I never came back. But that's the truth. That's what happened. I didn't abandon my post, but emotionally, I never went back. I had made a commitment to my family, and that commitment to my family started with myself getting better. After years of dealing with anxiety and depression, I realized that I'd just been a version of myself, and they deserved a better version than that. And that's when it changed for the better.
It's big stuff. And it's probably often that it takes a massive life event to reevaluate, isn't it? We get so caught up in our day-to-day, our business, our work, and we just like you said, we ignore a lot of our problems. And you talking about this, hopefully other people can open up. And you work with a lot of business owners. Do you see a lot of business owners and business leaders struggling in our industry as well?
Yeah, I do. I have a bit of a unique insight, I guess, that for two reasons. Since starting Without Fear, I've had hundreds of people in the last 12 months contact me. Some people I know, some people I don't. Some people I have proximity to, some I don't. And that's one way that I'm seeing that, but also through my work, coaching businesses. I'm working with 25 businesses right now, and it's the greatest privilege, and I'll never ever take that for granted. In fact, if you ever see me taking that for granted, then I want you to give me a tap on the shoulder and I'll stop. I'll walk away. But I get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the good, these companies that grow, improve, EBITDA, grow revenue, have amazing, successes and milestones. And I get to see also the personal hardship that people go through in getting there. Also the personal hardship people that go through in pursuit of that unsuccessfully. And, there is, like, it's agonizing because I know that I wasn't ready at a lot of the times throughout my journey to have those conversations. But there are people that aren't ready. But there are people that also go through their life and build a business, and the business becomes their life. Even if it's not their own business, you don't have to be the owner to experience that, but you can throw your life into a business or a pursuit, any pursuit. And then when that suddenly, the chaos descends and there's control over the business, or you sell the business, and that thing that was keeping you moving no longer exists, you're left to sit in the stillness with what you've been denying or avoiding all that time. And I see that, and that is rife in most industries, but if I speak about the IT industry, there are a lot of people suffering. There are a lot of people hurting, and some of it is self-inflicted, some of it is their circumstance. But I see so many owners and leaders in this IT industry that are unwell and suffering from some sort of mental ill health.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's a combination of a number of factors. Quite often leaders, owners don't give themselves permission to hurt, don't give themselves permission to then therefore heal from that hurt, or they're just in a denial because they're kind of on this hamster wheel where if I step off the hamster wheel, then I'm going to have to confront those things. And it just compounds. And, there are so many changes through, the last 10 years. Well, there's probably more change in the last 2 years than the previous 8 before that. But if we talk about the last 10 years, the pace is so high that you just go from one thing to the next, from next to the next, and you don't stop long enough to actually protect your own confidence. You don't actually know whether you're doing a good job or not. You've lost sight of what a good job looks like, and you're just trying to keep up. And all the while, there's something brewing, and all these things aren't addressed. And that's definitely a major part of it. But there's also still a stigma around saying that I'm not okay, or I'm not well, or I've felt crap for a long time and I don't know what it is. And I had in the space of a couple of weeks, I had, we'll say 3, maybe 4 IT business owners contact me and say that haven't felt well for quite some time. They've been to doctors. There's nothing physically wrong with them. They've experienced things like, restlessness or fatigue or weight gain or all of those. And there's nothing that everyone just says to them, just, walk more, go to the gym, eat a bit better. That's all great advice, by the way. But there's often an underlying thing there of mental ill health that isn't being addressed. And, if the medical industry is still wrestling with that stigma, then, that's just a sort of thin edge of the wedge. The rest of us are all battling that as well.
I think that's a very insightful comment around like a lot of what we do becomes our identity. It's easier for most of us, especially men, to be brought up on it was a bit harsher. You just suck it up. You do what you do. The longer that you run your business, it becomes more and more of your identity ingrained. And I think your point around everyone starting really tired, the changes and disruption to our industry has been dramatic and only increasing. But I think everyone feels trapped. Like I talk to owners all the time around, why don't you look at selling? Why don't you look at doing something a bit different? And they're so trapped in their own position that they're unable to see past it a lot of the time.
Yeah, Micheal Gurber's book, the EMyth, there's a line in that book that you don't have a business, you have a job, and your boss is a psychopath. And whilst that's tongue-in-cheek, it's true for so many business owners, so many IT business owners, that they don't have a business, they've got a job, and they're at the mercy of this boss that is unreasonable, relentless, and the worst part is it's them. And as a result, they have a really high expectation of themselves, and they won't ease that long enough for them to feel whatever it is that they're experiencing, or to, so many people fall in a heap on holiday. And I used to do that. I used to take 2 weeks off, and it was about sort of 3 days before I had to go back that I felt rested. And it'd take a week to wind down. And if that's happening to you and you're listening to this, there's something wrong. Like, that's not normal. That's not how it should be. And you deserve better. So address that underlying factor that leads to you being that way, rather than just making light of it. Like, it's not cool to bust your gut. It's not cool to only sleep 4 to 6 hours a night. Both of those things are unhealthy. Like, I'm all for hard work, but if that gets harder to do every time, then there's something wrong.
And that's the common generic business advice out there, isn't it? Just hustle, just keep hustling, and one day it'll pay off. But that's not really the reality, is it?
It's not. And I was listening to an audiobook this morning on my way into the office, and challenging all these notions of like work smarter, not harder, and all this sort of stuff. And that's really easy to say, that sort of stuff. But, it's actually, if you don't slow down and you don't take stock of your own self and your health and your well-being, you actually lose sight of purpose. And it's actually when you lose sight of your purpose, then that's a really negative tipping point. And purpose, it doesn't need to be some sort of inspiring thing that Simon Sinek, taught you how to create at a workshop. It's actually understanding why you do what you do. And there's that old adage that if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. I say that's bullshit. If you love what you do, you get up every day, you work your ass off when you need to, and you love it. It's still work, but you love it. And the love of it means that some of the shit days, some of the ones that aren't all cupcakes and rainbows, you get through them because the purpose is what's driving you. And if you lose sight of that purpose, then it doesn't mean it's not catastrophic. You can get it back, but you're never going to get it back if you're on the hamster wheel and you use your holidays to sleep and recover.
And I think your point around the purpose doesn't need to be this huge world-changing thing that you're driving to. Some of the owners I've worked with and helped them refine their purpose and their energy. It's been simple things like, well, they just want to set their kids up to buy a house, or they just want to pay off their mortgage and have a comfortable life. It's simple things like that. It doesn't need to be grand. I think that's what holds a lot of people back from stopping and reflecting on this kind of stuff, because it seems too big.
Yeah, and that comes back to one of the greatest fears that we live with as humans, and most of our fears are rooted in what people will think of us. And that even stops some people, as silly as it sounds, from committing to a purpose or a reason for being or a goal or a BHAG, because what will other people think? Like that's the opposite of why you do it. You're not doing it for other people and about what they think. Because I can tell you that for all those people that you think are thinking stuff about you, probably 1 in 1,000, 1 in 100,000 will say is actually thinking about you. So because they're too busy thinking about what are other people thinking of me. So yeah, and that's a blocker sometimes for people. And personally knowing why I do what I do and knowing what my domain is actually just gives me focus. And my mantra that I have for myself is connecting people with possibilities. And so I do that in Without Fear, the possibility of a better way of living on the back of just telling your story, breaking that stigma. With IT and not just IT, but business owners in general, the possibility that there is a better way to run the business and there's a better way to live. And that's just a possibility, and I use it as a decision-making thing. Before we started this podcast, we're talking about I did work really hard for a long time to be in a position now where I can choose what I want to do. But I run it through that lens. If what I'm doing isn't connecting people with a possibility, then I don't do it. And that's not an arrogance thing. That's a knowing where I'm best placed.
I think that's super important. It's like, I think especially IT business owners, they're quite selfless in general. So they've given the sacrifice
absolutely.
for the business, the sacrifice for the clients, the sacrifice for the employees. And they feel very selfish when they stop and go, well, what's actually in it for me? What am I doing? What do I want to do? And make those decisions about them. But you need to protect yourself and give yourself the permission to go, this is what I actually want, and drive towards that, and create a balance. Like you said, you can't keep sacrificing for your business.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people that contact me, and they'll say that they know someone who isn't going so well, that needs some help, and they ask for advice, and I'm happy to give advice on how they can help with that. But the first thing I say is, are you okay? Because your ability to help others, to serve others, is dramatically impacted if you're not well yourself. If you're not, forget about the utopian 100%. If you're not 80% well, then you're not going to be able to help others. And so as a leader and a business owner, if you're not prioritizing yourself and your own state, then it's going to impact your ability to lead others to show up for your customer, to be able to deliver on a promise, even sometimes, if you're not taking care of yourself. And, that's not like the people joke about the mechanic who neglects their car and all that sort of stuff, the doctor who's sick all the time. That if that serves a purpose to actually get you to reflect on yourself, then that's useful. But if you just think, oh yeah, and laugh it off, then you're actually not going to get better and get well. And then you may have a life event that rips the handbrake, and you're better off, easing the brake long enough to get well than having to suddenly pivot your whole life around a major health event.
And I think those major events as well, most of us as small business owners are hanging our success for our retirement on being able to sell the business. And if we've got one of those major events, most of our businesses aren't in a position to survive that, because it's, like you said, it's a job that it's revolving all around us.
Yeah, spot on. And I don't know that there's actually like a silver bullet for that. But it starts with an awareness, and businesses that have a plan and are executing to a plan and have a rhythm of reviewing that plan, that's really important. But you need to make time also to check in with yourself on a similar rhythm. Because there's that, it's not just about the sale event. Like, I'm all for running your business like it's ready to be sold. Like, that's really healthy, and having an exit plan. But if you create a rhythm and a cadence around your own wellness and your own life separate to the business, then when that business does end, there is a sale event or you exit and retain ownership, then you're not suddenly sitting there staring into the nothingness. You've thought about life after, and it's healthy. It's a healthy pursuit. It's like when I go on holiday with my family, we always book the next holiday because we want to make that commitment to ourselves and to each other, and also have something to look forward to. So when you stop as a business leader, a business owner, and think about what the plan is for the next 12 months, think about who you want to be as well, what you want to achieve personally in that time. And that way you can run this cadence alongside it, and you can also create accountability to do that as well on the same rhythm.
I think that's a great piece of advice, and I think that personal success piece, only you can decide what's success for you. I think that too many people are caught up in those one-liners like, if you're not growing, you're dying. So everyone thinks they need to be $100 million businesses to be successful. They get caught up in this rather than running their own race. And I think, how do you, with business owners, obviously they're typically very isolated because of the type of role, the sacrifice, etc. How do you start getting less isolated in such a role?
I've always been a really big believer of peer groups, and peer groups in so many ways will give you benefits that you could never have imagined. And everything through from the really basic learning and growing together, getting better at what we do, and like sharing the whole better together kind of concept. But having conversation and connection with people who understand you and get you, no matter what your role is, if you're leading the service delivery, or you're leading sales, or you're the business owner, or you're the general manager, just having peers who you don't have to wade through all the crap of explaining what you do, and you can just get to the heart of actually connection and the human connection. I think that's really important. It's absolutely super important. And the earlier the better. Like finding your people is really important. And, I coach junior footy, and I love it. It's like one of my favourite things in the world, coaching junior footy. I don't think I'll ever coach senior footy, because for me, the getting upstream of the passion and the love of being a part of something is what's most valuable. But as humans, we need to belong to something. and we need to belong, and we're pack animals. And there's Dunbar's number, which is like 150 as the size of a community, right down to 15 close connections. For me, my number's 8. I need 8 people in my sphere, 8 close people that I just have a regular connection with. And some of those are friends, some are family, some are peers, some of them are colleagues. But that sense of connection is really important, because you can isolate yourself. You can go inward and not come out. You can go inward and think that actually I've got this, and this echo chamber happens, and then I used to joke that I'm amazing at convincing myself of stuff that isn't true. I have this amazing ability to get inside my own head and like assemble a jury that's just 12 of me, and I can convince myself of anything. And I took comfort a little bit in the misery of Michael Jordan in the Last Dance documentary, where he just had the same sort of thing. He could convince himself that there were these headlines written about him that weren't true, that people were trash talking him, and he'd take it out on the court. And in his pursuit, it was useful. But I can tell you, as a business leader and a business owner, it's not useful. It's unhealthy. You can get stuck down that rabbit hole, and that way, if you've got, for me, it's 8 close connections, and I can just say to them, I'm going through this right now. And I went for a walk last night with one of those people. Beautiful spring evening, and we just unpacked something. And 45 minutes to an hour later, I was brand new. And I went home, and that weight was gone. So that sense of belonging, you need to listen to that.
Yeah, I'd agree 100% with peer groups. I think there's nothing better than building that peer support network around you, whether it's based on your role, based on just being a business owner, based on industry, whatever, that building a connection with other people so you create a support network that you haven't had. It's not just good for yourself, but that wider insight, and getting less isolated and breaking that siloed thinking. I've seen dramatic changes for people around that. But I'd also say one of the things I think that's quite undervalued in building that network as well is putting the right advisors around you. We might be a bit biased in what we do, but I've seen when you've got that cohort of advisors around your business that you're paying for, they're focused on your business. It gives you another support network that's probably deeper and more involved than you've had before, especially with the leadership talent gap that we see. I don't know how much you see that gap between maybe an owner's experience and then the next level leader. There's just, I think, a missing generation.
Yeah, in some cases, yeah. And I think that it's some often missing pieces of that sort of capability. Their business owner at some point had to be everything, and especially if they started on their own. Like, I love it when I see, and this is no disrespect to those lone wolves out there who started their business on their own and have carved out a really respectable business. I love it when I see 2 people start a business together. There's something magic that happens, especially when their values aligned and their purpose aligned, and they want the same ultimate goal. That they don't have to want all of the micro things the same, but ultimately they share that goal. They'll always achieve more, and it doesn't always mean quantity. I'm not just talking about revenue. I'm talking about impact, because you'll have a diversity of thinking baked in. And if you don't have that as a business owner and a leader, then you need to seek that. And sometimes, so I implement, it's no secret, I implement EOS in businesses, and I do focus on technology businesses because I love them. They're my people. I love the people. And it's a great privilege because I also form these beautiful connections with people. And to the I guess the limit of my capacity, I love being there for those people and being in their corner. And I'll often send messages to people telling them that I'm in their corner, and just as a reminder, and not because I want them to think that they're special because I've chosen them. It's actually the opposite. It's really important to know that people are in your corner. And that can be sometimes the difference for how people approach a situation or an event, knowing that they've got people in their corner.
It, it's so easy to get sucked in. You're just sucked into that day-to-day business as usual, putting the fires out from yesterday in our industry. That that sort of messaging is so important. I know the way that I do the business advisory, I'm talking to people very frequently, and half the time for owners, it ends up being a bit of a therapy session to vent and get everything out, and then refocus on what do I need to work on. And without without that sort of network, it'd just be continually getting sucked into the negativity and wouldn't come out of it.
Yeah, yeah, spot on. And one thing that I really try and I guess stamp on all of those, there's interactions with people where they'll where they'll open up and they'll share whatever it is they're going through. Is I always try and leave those conversations with, so what now? What are we doing next? Because it's I don't want it to seem like it's super action oriented, but if you've just got it off your chest, it'll feel good for like 24 hours max. But if you've got it off your chest and this is what you're going to do next, then you create momentum. And so that's what I often say to people. So what next? What do we do? Do you want me to call you next week? Have you got a plan? Who can help? All those sorts of things. And that's something that I probably didn't fully understand. You can easily go, you can go to the pub and unload, download, and get all these things off your chest, and then really feel really good, and then have a couple of cans of courage and feel even better, and then you wake up the next morning a little bit sore and sorry for yourself, and you actually probably didn't get anything constructive out of those conversations. So yeah, it's just an insight past Dan trying to help future people.
I think what I'd pass on to from my experience of doing this is I'm finding more and more I'm when letting people vent, doing the same thing as you, like what's next, what's our plan, but also positives. What have we achieved in the last week, the last 2 weeks, the last month? Like everyone's so focused on what's next, what's bad, what's wrong. They're not stopping to reflect on what they've achieved, what positives are going on, what they're doing well, and how to leverage that. And I've seen that need even more since probably COVID. I think a lot of people changed
Yeah.
through that period.
Yeah, and I think it's this pursuit of excess, like people pursuing more than what they have, and like that's rather than focusing on sufficiency. So sufficiency comes from recognizing what you have, acknowledging what you have, and gratitude for what you have. If you're always chasing more, then the only answer is more. So I encourage people to focus on sufficiency, and if you can create some accountability. Like I'm a big fan of the Resilience project and the Imperfects podcast, and something that I learned from one of their episodes where Hugh Van Cuylenberg was talking about introducing gratitude deliberately in his family. Instead of just focusing on what you're grateful for, just ask, instead of saying, what am I grateful for? Just what went well? And answer the question, what went well? And the fact that you acknowledge that it went well is a demonstration of gratitude for it. So I agree wholeheartedly, because, if excess is the only answer, then we just need to keep piling more and more. But if sufficiency is where we focus, then it actually creates like this abundance where I have enough, I am enough, and you're able to inadvertently help others and create more, but not through the need to create more.
It's a very interesting concept, and we've been talking a lot about business owners, and probably to touch on a point is we're dealing with a whole bunch of new generations coming into the IoT industry that may be a little less resilient, have different expectations. And I think we need to lead by example on setting this sufficiency sort of mindset and gratitude mindset early on for them to help them so they don't make the same mistakes that we have.
Yeah, true. And I think it comes down to making that acknowledgement of what went well and what we have habitual. If you can make that a habit, then you're part of the way there. And I don't know that the resiliency is necessarily always the issue. It's the gratification that we live in. We live in the age of instant gratification and instant acknowledgement and dopamine addiction. And you can fight that. You can say how annoying that is, how frustrating that is, or you can acknowledge your part in that and acknowledge that actually some recognition, a little recognition goes a long way. And a little recognition often goes further. And if you're prepared to make that a habit and not cheapen it and make it token, make it genuine and heartfelt and link it to a plan, then you will get more from people. And we'll have less conversations about how flaky people are and standards, and focus on the output rather than input, and and reward that. What gets recognized gets repeated. So that's an opportunity.
Well, we're sort of coming up to time. We've been speaking about some very important topics. Is there anything else you'd like us to know about Without Fear and how to get involved, and again what it's all about and what you're trying to do?
Yeah, so our ultimate goal is by 2032 to have 100,000 people living without fear. And that takes shape and form in lots of different ways, but ultimately is removing the fear of speaking up about our mental health and well-being. So we are a for-profit business. We're a social enterprise, but 100% of our profits are invested into projects that benefit the mental health and well-being of the community. We're about to make a significant investment into a project which I'm going to announce soon, very soon, which is exciting. And the best way for you to get involved is to follow us on social media. You choose your platform of choice. We're at Without Fear Co. on Instagram, which is probably the most prolific of our channels. And our apparel, we have high quality apparel, t-shirts, hoodies, singlets, beanies. We're about to release caps. And 100% of the profits from the sale of that apparel goes to those projects. And you can get involved. Also, we also do collaboration. We've got half a dozen or so collaborations with companies. A couple of IT businesses recently got on board, and we did a brand collaboration to raise awareness. But I'm also open to doing talks in your workplace, in your office, if that's or via Teams or Zoom or whatever. But just keep the conversation going. If you engage with our content, then that's like if that's all you did, then I'd be grateful. If you bought apparel, then fantastic. If you got us to speak to your people, then that's amazing. If we collaborate, then we're perpetuating the message. So there's lots of ways. We have withoutfearco.com is our website. Can check it out there. Connect with me on whatever channel as well you like. I'm not the fastest to respond, but I'll always respond.
Well, you're taking the time for yourself and rejuvenating. So that's
a
it's
true.
lesson
I'm
in
walking
itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, what it's been a very deep and we've covered a lot of different areas. What do you want to wrap up with? What do you want people to take away from this session and do next?
Look, I would love for people to tell their story, to know that someone needs to hear their story, and not to compare what you're going through to other people and have that as a reason why you don't. And don't be afraid to start that conversation, because you're creating a space and an opening for others to have that conversation. And ultimately, the more of us that are demonstrating a readiness to overcome those fears that aren't serving us, we're setting a precedent for others. So have those conversations, more of them, have them often, and then when you do, just focus on what happens next. Have a plan in place, and the universe will provide.
I think that's some excellent wisdom, and I think that's so impactful what you've been talking about today, and I hope people that are listening today take this as an opportunity to start sharing their stories and start looking at how they're doing their business, how they're doing their leadership differently to start looking after themselves, because we need to. So I really appreciate jumping on, Dan. I hope to have you again.
My pleasure.
It's been fantastic.
Thank you so much for putting this on the agenda, and thanks for your generosity with your time. I appreciate it.
Hopefully it helps more people. That's what we're all about. So thank you.
Thanks a lot.